One of my roles is to be UN NGO representative for water spirit sponsors, the Sisters of St. Joseph of Peace. So, in that role, the sisters recently sent me down to Cali, Colombia for the 16th Conference of the Parties of the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity. The biodiversity space at the UN is really interesting because the Secretariat has had more openness toward engaging with the faith communities. So for 4 years since its founding, I've been involved with the Faiths for Biodiversity Coalition, which encourages faith communities with UN accreditation to get involved in those high-level biodiversity talks. And going to Colombia recently was just such a joyful experience, also in part because not only was I surrounded by all these other faith uh, representatives from many different traditions who all share this mandate to care for the community of life. But we also had an opportunity to have a small group session with Astrid Schomaker, the executive secretary herself. And when she entered the room with us, I I almost like physically saw her shoulders relax and her like setting down her burdens for a moment. And the burdens at the conference were not few, right down to like the Wi-Fi not working for these tens of thousands of people. But with us, she took her breath, caught her breath, and told us that back toward the beginning of these biodiversity talks, her impression was that there was more of a spiritual tone to the language that was being used, even amongst these delegates from these member states, that there was an awareness of just the holy connection of the holy interconnectedness of the community of life. And that that spiritual tone got diluted or lost as the conversations became more technical and even more like dominated by business interests as well. And so she's finding it really energizing and exciting that there's now an increased shift back toward the spiritual in many of the talks. And that's brought by the faith communities, also by the significant presence of Indigenous peoples in that conference space as well. And it was so encouraging to us to hear that as a positive thing. And that hearing her say it confirmed what I had experienced in those spaces as well. When I would hear members from faith communities or Indigenous peoples, take the floor or share statements, more often than not, they were setting the tone for what's truly at stake here. When we're not just talking about like sequences of genetic information, we're not just talking about inert objects that exist purely for human use. In fact, what we're talking about is the holiness of the entire community of life that is imbued with rights by virtue of its mere existence. And so when the conversations between delegates can get so pointed and focused and technical and utilitarian, having other voices in the room to break through that noise and step back and say, actually, here's what's really at stake, recontextualizes the entire conversation.